Well, hello again. I'm Dr. LaChance, and we're here again to continue our journey through the 12 foundations of Unitive psychology, which I also call liberation psychology because of other reasons, which I'll explain at some point during the series. So today, what we're dealing with is foundation number 3. And I'm going to read it once. The creative impetus, the creative impetus of cosmic, geological, biological, and cultural evolution can be understood to be the progressive revelation in space and time, in energy and matter, of a pre-existent as well as immanent infinite consciousness. This infinite consciousness has different names in different cultures, but is nonetheless one. So, as always, we're going to go through it one statement at a time, and just to let you know what this is. We'll come to this in a bit. It's a graphic presentation of what I'll be talking about today, and I'll point to the various things to make it easier to understand what this is about. I call them bow ties, and I have several of them leading up to this one, but nothing in those as powerful, especially for me, because I've seen the evolution of them as what has happened that caused me to make this graphic presentation for you, and to record it as part of the series of bow ties that perhaps I'll show during this course. So, in our book, The Third Covenant, which, as always, I show you the cover because all this information is in there. In our book, The Third Covenant, my daughter and co-author Rebecca put it this way. She was summing up the third foundation. She says this, quote, "The physical universe is a manifestation of consciousness, that being the condensing of consciousness into energy and matter." Well, put in a very simple way, what that means is that there is this universal mind. The Buddhists actually call it that, the Buddha mind. And the reason that there is no beginning to the universe, and the physicist will tell you that, and then you'll say, well, why do you talk about the beginning then? Well, it's because the extension of the universal field of consciousness boils over from pre-time, from pre-space, from pre-energy, and from pre-matter into the expanding universe that we know of as our universe, the universe we live, move, and have our being in. So there was no beginning because all of it is ultimately consciousness. And what happened that we call, unpoetically call, the Big Bang, what happened there was the interiority of consciousness, the inside, the within, the subjectivity of consciousness perturbated, and out of that emerged light. And so we'll be looking at how that plays out, not only in the history of the universe, but because we are the universe. We'll see how that plays out in the emergence from pre-time into time and space. The proposal that she made, that Rebecca made, is at the same time simple and profound. Einstein puts it in his simple mantra, the way I like to think of it, scientific mantra, E equals mc squared. That's what he's captured in there. And he's not afraid. There are many scientists who are afraid to talk openly about what they believe preceded energy. But because we're in the universe of time, there's no way in physics to legitimately talk about that which came before, because we are that. So the discipline, the mathematical discipline of physics, stops at the beginning, at the actual beginning. But metaphysics begins there. The transcendence of physics into the various understandings that have been part of our legacy as a human from the cave until now. The first things we find about ourselves in the buried content of the caves and elsewhere, other ruins in Rome and Greece and elsewhere, are the attempt to try to understand, where did we come from? Who are we? And where are we going? So, E equals mc squared is kind of a simple way to articulate the fact that the universe really is one. In a sense, there is no mass. Because light has mass, in the end, the only thing we could say is, in the beginning there was light. And what is that but the beginning of the Gospel of John? And there are, I don't know how many mythological manifestations of it or descriptions of it, each of them being really a theory. So if you go back into Hebrew history, you can imagine a rabbi way back in prehistory. You can imagine him sitting there with little children around them, and the children have looked at the sky and they say, "Rabbi, where did this all come from?" And then he begins, "In the beginning, God said," and goes on from there. Well, God in that sense is a synonym for consciousness. And that's what we'll be dealing. I'll make that very clear in a few moments. Energy freezes into mass. Mass has its source in energy, but what about the source of energy itself? What about its source? Well, all of those theories that we call myths are attempts on the part of pre-scientific humanity to create a theory about the beginning and how this all happened. So, in science itself, a theory can only become fact by its repeatability. The experiment has to be repeated in order to verify the outcome of the first theoretist. Well, what we're going to look at today is another theory. And it arrived in a very exalted mood on my part. I'll put it that way. Very exalted. So much so that I had to go back and read what it was that just happened to me. This was yesterday afternoon. And when I now go into these visionary states, they are informed by cosmology, anthropology, archaeology, art history, all of the various disciplines of the 12 disciplines that I work in inform what is revealed. So this is not just a hallucination. When it comes through me, in particular, it comes through a database that shapes it. into what would be acceptable scientifically and all the other disciplines that I work in. So can I prove that? No. You either have to take it at my word or not. That's all I can say. So, in the simple statement of Foundation 3, mass and energy are both transcended and included in consciousness. And ultimately, everything is transcended and included in consciousness. Physics is transcended and now included in metaphysics. So, imagine an hourglass lying on its side. It's the bow tie that I just talked about. Think of it as perhaps an hourglass on its side, or a bow tie, if that's what you want to imagine. Imagine that the left side of the bow tie, I've got a pointer, the left side of the bow tie of the hourglass or hourglass is an infinite and unbounded universe, infinite and unbounded. In other words, it goes on forever without boundary. It creates its own sub-boundaries. As your body is boundaried by your skin, my body is by its skin. We are separate entities. Differentiation, remember we visited this already, subjectivity, interiority, and communion. You're not me, I'm not you. You're sentient, I'm sentient. Oh, you are me, I am you. All three are true. And as soon as you go off the rails with any one of them, things are skewed. It goes into a kind of loosey-goosey nihilism, or into a hardened and insistent, the Tao Te Ching says, it rolls up, it asserts itself with rolled up sleeves. In other words, it becomes one or the other, or the one in the middle. It becomes sentimental, or if the three of them are seen as a kind of koan, where you say, well, how can everything be different and unique? Everything is sensitive and conscious on every level. Everything is one. How can that be? And that is to be rolled around in one's own mind until it's revealed. And we would call that, now I understand it. But something like that has to be understood from a different dimension of the psyche. Cognition is at play in the beginning. You have to know something, you have to know about something before you can know it. The subjectivity is your own response or lack of it too, lack of response to it. And the communion is once you got it, then you begin to understand, felt understanding of the universe, the magnificence in which we walk, complaining about our little losses. So, there is an infinite and unbounded universe of enfolded or introverted light. That's right here. You have on this side of the bow tie this darkness. Now, I would like to suggest that we think of it as a black hole. It isn't, and black holes have a bad rap anyway in some ways because they're light eaters. But in a sense, it's a black hole because it can't be seen from this side. It can't be seen. The light is introverted. So here you have this well of introverted light that cannot be seen from the outside, and so appears not to exist. And it is the source of the light that pours out of it. That's what this little arrow, poorly drawn arrow, is. And that moment is called reincarnation, taking on flesh again. Karn Carn is Latin for meat. And so when we are remeated, in a sense, when we once again enter form, we are reincarnated. So then the extroverted light can be seen because we're in it. This is it now. We're in the expanding universe. And we can't see this because the darkness, the introverted light, prevents light from escaping it. And that's what it has in common with the black hole. Light can't escape it. The question then becomes, what's this? What is in here? If it is filled with light and open in both directions, what is this? And what I'm going to try to talk about, and I've already caused myself to repeat myself because I'm jumping ahead, what I call this is heaven. What has been understood all the way along by the avatars and by the mythologies that were theories of the universe and theories of the sacred. It has been called paradise. It has been called heaven, the pure land. It's been called many, many different things. In fact, it's always called something. But with scientific understanding and imagery or symbology, we can talk about the fact that the light is introverted here so that the edge is dark. And because we can't see this, when we pass through death, we don't really know at first where we're going, and so we're afraid of it. We think about it, we fear it. The animals don't. The animals don't fear it. They're so much more noble than we are about all of that. They live and they die. And they even accept our mass killing of them for food on some level. Because somewhere in them there lives the consciousness that is not afraid of what's here. It doesn't know it. I mean, they don't sit around and think about, well, is the Confucian version of it better than the Hindu version? It's not like that. But they don't have the fear of the unknown. They have instinctual fear. There is a fear that comes with the knowledge of physical injury. But they don't spend their lives fearing it. We do. It's called neurosis. And what I'm going to try to do as a psychologist is to show that there is nothing to fear here, because we're talking about the healing of the soul. And in the end, every fear we have is the fear of our own mortality. In the end, it all boils down to, what if I don't? Well, it's just the fear that we have of our own mortality. So there is no mortality, is what I'm hoping that unitive psychology brings into the therapeutic environment, because that's the beginning of wellness. That's the beginning of peace, is to believe that someone else believes that there really isn't anything to fear. In fact, you do have records of people like St. Paul saying he couldn't wait to die. He wasn't suicidal. He just was so convinced that he was dying into light that he was eager for it. And there are many other instances of that. So the light can't escape at any direction except into the bottom of the hourglass on the right. The only escape for this light to be made manifest is right here, in the reincarnation of all creatures. Thomas Berry used to tell me that the universe rises into beatitude as a whole. It's not just humans entering, rocketing out of their sunroofs during a rapture of some kind and being reborn again or whatever. The whole universe moves, and so does Teilhard de Chardin before him. The whole universe moves from spirit to energy to matter to spirit. That's the evolution of the entire cosmos. Can I prove this? No. the introverted light pours forever into the glowing universe of light on the right side. This never ends. It's a cyclical thing, and it's yin and yang. That's what the Chinese came up with, the understanding that everything is light and dark. So here's the darkness, and here's what we fear. And I guess there's a place for hell and whatever there, if that's how you want to see it. I think hell is a state of consciousness, the ruination of consciousness where it is. And that's why I'm so impressed with the author of Hamilton and his willingness to point out that ontologically, at the level of being, the kind of evil that's being perpetrated is a direct road to hell. So whatever little that can be said about it in myth and subsequently in Scripture has already been said or alluded to in all traditions. And in order to find a real source to study that, I would suggest that anyone really interested should go to Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces, which is only the introduction to a 4-volume work called The Masks of God, Oriental, Occidental, and Creative Mythology. I forget, what he calls primitive, and he means primos there, first, not primitive in the sense of some horrible stigma. So to go to those books provides us with a real understanding of how ubiquitous this all is in human history. Every culture on earth seeks the source. You could, I suppose, say that they had no other way to say it. Like, you can look back from the point of view of, I was talking with a friend of mine, Nick, the other day, and I heard him giving a talk saying that he admitted publicly in his talk that he was a technological addict. He came right out and said it. He's a techno addict, and he realizes it. And he's come to see that there's an arrogance, as there is in all addiction, there's an arrogance that covers up something. And what he said it covers up is the fact that the things that the ancients knew somehow were the only way they could say it. In other words, that they were naive, and when they were talking about the stars and all of that stuff, the relationship with the earth, the relationship with the other species, they were all just kind of naive. A naivete of the beginning. Well, he says that's not it. He said we have forgotten ourselves in technology, and now we have to relearn all those skills again. We have to learn how, not that we have to, in the sense of, well, we got to do this, but how? How do we learn again to be in sync with the birds and the other species? In a strange way, there's no such thing as the United States. There's an ideology of the United States, but really what we're talking about is North America. You take away the government of Canada, the United States, and Mexico, and what you have is North and South America, continents. How do we live in the continents without ruining everything? That's what we have to relearn. We've got a big relearning cycle in front of us. And I am so grateful that I came across one essay by Teilhard de Chardin in 1973 during a month of sobriety, if I'm honest. Back then, I didn't achieve permanent sobriety until 1978. But I read an essay by Teilhard de Chardin called How I Believe. And suddenly, everything just came together. So, I'm pointing this out so that if you want to find out one essay, just taste of this, just an hors d'oeuvre of what this is about, How I Believe. And I would follow that up with The New Story by Thomas Berry. Another essay. Two essays. Two essays and you've got the foundation for everything unitive. So, T.S. Eliot called this darkness the darkness of God. And when you read it, it says, oh, dark, dark, dark. We all go into the dark, the vacant interstellar spaces, the vacant into the vacant. Then he goes through all the self-important careers of humans, stockbroking or whatever else it might be, eminent men of letters, builders, contractors. He just goes through a number of them just to show that this is not about class variegation. This is about the human soul. And so he says, in dark the sun and moon, and the Almanac de Gotha, and the Stock Exchange Gazette, and cold the sense, and lost the motive of action. And we all go with them into the silent funeral, no one's funeral, for there is no one to bury. The burial happened back on earth. It was just the physical form. There's no one to bury because there's no death. St. John of the Cross calls it the dark night of the soul and suggests that he's visited this zone by profound introversion through depression. And if people could understand depression in such a way as to realize that it's a slowing down of the organism in order for the soul to manifest itself. Now, obviously, if a person, is sitting around with a gun in their mouth, you don't come out with this stuff and think that that's somehow going to resolve it for them. But generally, the unitive counselor would have in mind the difference between a terminal illness depression and that which is just a calling. What do? We throw trainloads of Zoloft and Prozac and everything else we can manufacture into them, and they just sort of go numb. The crisis is over, and sometimes that's got to happen. That's got to happen. If a person is going off a cliff, you have to throw them some kind of a safety net, some kind of rope. But in my experience as a counselor, 25 years with serious addicts, I'm not sure that I've seen 5 who were actually on their way to suicide. And yet now, through oxys and heroin, I just heard another one last night. Another one. This poor woman was listening to me speak, and she raised her hand and started crying, and she just lost her son in his 20s. It's every day for me. Day before that, I heard of a young woman who died. So we speak of dark energy. This is all part of physics now. We speak of dark energy and we speak of dark matter. And they're intriguing terms. They create curiosity. Dark energy? Dark energy. It can't be seen from here. It's dark. It's surrounded by introverted light that pours continually into the center here of paradise or heaven or the Pure Land, wherever you want to, whatever anyone wants to call it, it does not matter. So we speak of dark energy and dark matter. Now, I'm claiming a universe of dark consciousness, and I don't mean evil. That's a different thing. That's a cloud over consciousness. I'm talking about dark consciousness. I don't believe those two words have ever been put together, at least not in my experience. And I have a lot of experience looking for these things. But it just dawned on me yesterday. What about dark consciousness? And then this whole image unfolded inside of me. So darkness shall be the light, and stillness the dancing. T.S. Eliot. So darkness shall be the light, and stillness the dancing. So, what if we're talking about containing this dark consciousness containing heaven, what has been referred to as heaven, enfolded or introverted by dark consciousness surrounding it? It can't be seen from here. We can't see it, so we fear it. As we and all creatures die, we awaken in light contained in the dark universe. So here we go. We go through death, and what happens is we're reborn in a dark universe of light. Only, and by the way, that's resurrection. These terms are reusable, they're recyclable in the modern understanding. That is resurrection. We reawaken in a world of light and then reincarnate, enter form again in an extroverted light cosmos, one that glows, the one we're in. So as we awaken in light contained in the dark universe, that awakening is called resurrection. And as the dark universe sprays, that's one way to think about it, sprays its light into the light universe, right here, takes place. It just happens. Reincarnation is that process. Here is the reconciliation of East and West, right there. Teilhard de Chardin began it, Thomas Berry continued it, and my job is to extend that tradition, and as I did, I think last week, call upon the Pope to convene a Third Vatican Council in order to integrate what was avoided. Right now, well, 1955 to now, Teilhard died in 55. I think Tom died in 1997, something like that. And right now, we would have a sacred cosmology, a sacred geology, a sacred biology, and a sacred intercultural understanding. We don't have any of that. That's the problem. That is why we consider suicide again via nuclear exchange. We finger the gun yet again, as we did when the Soviet Union, the SU, did it with the US. Mirror images of each other. The SU and the US. Fingering the gun and asking themselves, shall we take life off the planet 8 times over in one afternoon? And we said no, and we put the gun down. And we began to try to step back from that precipice. And what are we doing at the moment? We're doing it again. And why are we doing it? Because the world cannot support cultures that are crazy, cultures that have gone mad. The world is breaking down. Now, Ken Wilber, I spent a day with Ken Wilber talking about all of this stuff. And he said something once that really stuck with me, so much so that I'm repeating it again. He said, the journey is repeatable. This journey into understanding is repeatable, like any experiment. So if you don't want to buy in, this is Wilbur talking, if someone doesn't want to buy in, fine. That's the choice. You don't want to buy in. But if you don't repeat the experiment, any experiment, you have no comment to make about the result. If you just say, "Oh, come on, Albert, isn't this a bit too much? You can't prove this." Well, I can't prove it in the way I can prove, 2 and 2 are 4. But the repeatability of the result is there in Yogananda, it's there in Aurobindo, it's there in the poets, it's there in the painters, it's there in Meister Eckhart, it's there in so many different people that it's repeatable. It passes, if you want to call it that, the scientific exam. The scientific exam. It's repeatable. But here's the rub. You can't do this. You can't have a hole bored in the 6th chakra and put in a chip and somehow have that be enlightenment. Now, maybe somewhere down the road, the way technology is going, who knows? But right now, we can't do that. You have to repeat the experiment. And the experiment is not measured in months or years. It's measured in decades. So you come to a crisis in your life where everything is jammed up, where everything is stopped in its tracks, and you're asked a question. Are you willing to go forward on your journey? Not on what somebody else has prepared for you, on your journey. That's the experiment. Now, you can say, "No, I'm not, and I'm going to get a job at the post office," which is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The mail has to be delivered. And you'll get good, insurances and all that stuff. But you'll die knowing that you were asked a question. Every one of us is asked a question because we are that question. We are it. So the way we answer is the way we arrive here as either awakened or truly dead. What we consider to be heaven or paradise, then, is the internal world of the dark, or the nighttime universe is a way to think about it. The nighttime cosmos, the daytime cosmos. Again, evil is a different thing. Evil is a different thing. And we'll be dealing in foundation number 5 with a book called People of the Lie, the 4 rubrics to diagnose evil in the human personality by Dr. M. Scott Peck. That'll come down the road. That's a different thing. I call it the scotosphere. We have to decide at some point. We're stopped in our tracks. And I was stopped in my tracks, and it was really scary. It was really scary. I had 2 children and nothing going for me. Nothing. So the internal world of the dark or nighttime cosmos, what we consider the universe that we're in, is the daytime cosmos. And it has its source in the darkness. So the darkness shall become the light, and the stillness the dancing. The cosmos of light is the interior of the cosmos of darkness. And the only reason we can't see it is because that's the way the universe is constructed. It's like saying, why do such elephants have such big bodies and such small tonsils? And the answer is, that's what elephants are like. Well, this is a theory of the universe, but it's a theory informed through world mythology, world traditions, East, West, and indigenous, and science itself. It's informed by all of that. What we consider to be heaven or paradise, then, is something that we fear or try to dismiss as just silly mythology. Well, myth is not a synonym for lie or fantasy. Myth is the language of the unconscious. As mathematics and language are the language of consciousness, myth is the language of the unconscious. You could say it's the language of the heart. We find out what the heart knows that way. We all must make the painful and dangerous journey alone and ourselves. We're born alone and we die alone. Good and bad thieves that we are, all of us, we must meditate deeply into ourselves past all the opposites. We have to leave our comfortable places in the daytime universe of light and descend lower, another Eliot term, descend lower, descend beyond the world, not world, but that which is not world, internal darkness, deprivation, destitution, desiccation of all property, evacuation of the world of spirit, inoperancy of the world of spirit, desiccation of the world of sense, evaporation of the world of spirit, inoperancy of the world. Anyway, it's in the four quartets. And it's the same thing. Because we are the universe, because we are it, we're a dimension of it, it's only discoverable meaningfully or experientially in ourselves. We have to know first where we're going, but we've got to go there alone. And so, past the darkness, this is not a job measured in months or years, I've already said that. It's the taking of our lives and making them an experiment in consciousness. That's what it's about. Repeating the experiment by letting go of our hour here, because we don't know the eternity that is here. As we penetrate the thick shell of darkness, right here, through meditation, we enter the light. We are then able to see that there is no death, and we can transcend our primate fears of death. We can then ascend back into the daytime universe, knowing that there is only light, and that we ourselves are that very light. Yeshua, Jesus, has shown us how to become vehicles for the light, and those who live in darkness. This gift is the gift of the bread and the cup. And to understand why, we have to understand that the intention he left us with here opens the door backward to here. And it is eternal life. It's non-temporal life. It is not endless life, though life is endless. It is eternal life. So we're actually calling forth this whole thing in the Western world. The problem with Christianity has finally been made manifest. And what it really is, on one hand, spiritual cowardice, the refusal to stand up to what is clearly evil and face off with it. But also because the only thing he left was his life story, best read, I think, in the Gospel of John. He left us also with confession, with self-emptying, which in the East is sunyata. But he left us just this cup and this plate and their contents. The rest of it is artists. The grand cathedrals, the beautiful operatic masses of Vivaldi and others, the incredible expressions in the Louvre and other museums of Christian art and other kinds of art. All of that is not Yeshua. And what's happened is the new generations are so mesmerized by technology that they don't even see that stuff anymore as particularly important. It's a nice object from the past, and they'll look at it, and it's not important. It's not. What's important is the simple thing we were told to do, a remembrance in bread and wine, where the only talent needed is to swallow. And the consecration in many churches is fruit of the vine. It does not require alcohol. It requires organic grape juice. The dark shell that surrounds the introverted light creates the fear of hell. It is not hell. Hell is the lowering of consciousness, the disintegration of consciousness, wherein the loss of the experience of the sacred becomes actual. I'm going to repeat that sentence. Hell is the lowering or disintegration of consciousness wherein the loss of the experience of the sacred becomes actual. We lose God. We lose the notion of our own sacredness, the experience of it. And that is why the program that I think could be described as a psychological and spiritual democracy, the program of the recovery programs, is sound psychology, at the same time sound spirituality, because the answer is not psychological only. So we're in a psychological and spiritual democracy where each person moves at their own rate and toward their own understanding and lets that then evolve. Doesn't matter where it starts. It only matters that it starts. So then, foundation 3. Oh yeah, I wanted to quote, fascism is one of many presentations of hell. Fascism is a presentation of hell. It represents descending and disintegrated consciousness, and then the attempt to dominate out of that weakness, not out of the strength of ideas. Hebrew prophet Leonard Cohen reminds us that God pours mercy into hell. He describes God as the one who pours mercy into hell. Each of our hells. I have been the recipient of that mercy. So to wind up, foundation 3, the pressure or impetus of evolution is the expression of this light into, and on a continual basis, into the universe of light. And then it's recycling. And I would imagine that a theology that includes evil, a definition of evil, would describe something like those who cannot bear the light live in this darkness. And that if there is a hell that we know of, it's there. And God, from here, not only pours that way, but pours into hell itself. I was shaken for days when my friend called me and read that to me. The one who pours mercy into hell. Leonard Cohen. So, cosmically, that is, we refer to as the Big Bang. The cosmos is the portal between, what we call the Big Bang is a portal between the dark and light universes. And at the same time, it's all one universe. It's yang, yin and yang. That's what it is. From quanta to subatomic, from subatomic to atomic, from atomic to megamolecular, to cells, early life, green plants, reptiles, mammals, primates, humans, from elementary particles to galaxies, to solar systems, planets and life systems. The light continues to flow from the darkness into the light. They are both sacred and together form the yin and yang, as I just said. Everything expands, grows, dies, is reborn, and reformed. The creative pressure of paradise is the source of the whole evolutive universe. The same force speaks through the avatar voices of all traditions. They are all one, and that is wonderful. O-N-E, wonderful. We are born sacred from the dark, and we live sacred in the light. We don't have to become sacred. We are sacred. That's our nature. We have to realize it. I like that word better than enlightenment. The realization of who we really are. The Zen Buddhists say it all the time. You're already enlightened. You only have to realize it. We need only to be who we already are. The avatar voices of all traditions call to us. The big question really is, are we going to listen? Thank you. And next time we'll do foundation number 4.